This video contains major spoilers for Fire Emblem, or FE7, or Blazing Blade, whatever. Switch Online has been a great addition to the console family. It allows us to play past titles that we may not get to experience otherwise. I don't think I would have ever played Blazing Blade without it, but I'm thankful that I decided to finally jump into it. It serves as the introduction of Fire Emblem in the West, and shows just how far the series has evolved in the 22 years since it released. I'm Ouroboros. Let's talk. Since Blazing Blade was the first title in the series to release in the West, its story, and gameplay therefore, serve as a tutorial for new players. The story is split up into two sections: Lynn's story and Eliwood/Hector's story. More on that in a bit. The narrative is, well, it's there. It's not great. Nothing really interesting happens from moment to moment for the most part. It's pretty bare bones. However, the world does feel really fleshed out. While I don't get a big sense of culture from each of the different nations in Alib, I do feel like the team over at Intelligent Systems focused on the interpersonal relations between the different nobles of each area. That does play well into the politics of the game, but there's not a ton of depth to really any of the characters. Lynn is a humble plainswoman who learns that she has a grandfather who is apparently a noble, and she sets out to save him from death. Eliwood is a noble who is searching for his missing father, and Hector is just kind of tagging along. I get the sense that so many of these characters are just really one-dimensional, and the story reflects that. Many of the plot moments are just, hey, we need to get from point A to point B, and oh no, there are bandits that we have to take care of. Many of the towns are video game levels that you just kind of pass through. A majority of the major character interactions just feel like formalities. That's not to say that there aren't good moments in the story. I really enjoyed seeing Elbert and Ninian's deaths, which sounds kind of morbid, that my two favorite moments were when characters died, but it was really the only time where we got to see the characters show any semblance of raw emotions. Everything else just feels so formulaic. That's my biggest gripe with the story. Nothing feels interesting. It's just a bunch of fluff. Intelligent Systems seem to put a ton of thought into creating the setting, one that comes directly from Binding Blade, this game's predecessor, but really fails to utilize it in any creative or interesting ways. It's disappointing. Now, I know that this is a GBA game. I know that creating an interesting and overarching narrative that keeps you engaged for 20 hours wasn't the goal, nor was it really feasible for this game. I know that game design and quality has drastically shifted over the past 20 years since the release of this game, but if we want to take a look at this game and evaluate it with a modern eye, a keener lens, I have to mention it. On one hand, it's disappointing. I adored Three Houses when I played it, not only for the tightly refined tactics gameplay, but for the fantastic character development and intriguing narrative. FE7 doesn't really have much going for it outside of its gameplay, which isn't a bad thing. I mentioned recently how much I'm enjoying playing these smaller games here and there. It's nice to have a break from those big, long, 100-hour RPGs that I love so dearly, but I found myself eagerly waiting for the dialogue to end so I could finally get back to the substance. I wouldn't even mind the subpar narrative if the characters were fun to see on screen, but the support conversations, one of the best parts about the series, is basically non-existent here. I think I saw maybe a total of 3 supports in the entirety of my FE7 playthrough. That doesn't seem to just be a me issue either. Supports take a long time to finally pop up, and if you progressively swap your lineup when you get good characters, or when others die, you're very likely to not see many either. You also don't get any kind of notification when they become available, so I'm sure that there were many that I missed simply because it didn't pop up when I was in combat. You also have to use a turn to view it, which, on many maps, is a problem. You don't want to be wasting your turns when those characters could potentially die because you just want to watch them say hi to each other. One thing the narrative does do right is the sense of progression with each major arc. The Lynn story is a very small-scale conflict. She's racing against the clock to save her grandfather, who's being poisoned. Then, with Eliwood, you're racing to save his father as more territories are slowly being pulled into this war. Finally, you fight against Nurgle and his synthetic human army to save the world from the dragon apocalypse. It's nice to feel those well-defined villain and story arcs. Never felt like the game was trying to do too much, cover too many topics, or set the stakes too high. It's one of the few things that the narrative does really well. Needless to say, though, I'm not a fan of FE7's approach to storytelling and character development. It really fell flat for me. Maybe I was expecting too much, or should have known what I was getting myself into a little bit better. However, let's get into the really fantastic part of this game, which is, of course, the gameplay. I love the tactics gameplay of Fire Emblem. Ever since picking up Shadow Dragon on the DS and getting my ass handed to me because I was in elementary school and didn't understand what was going on, it's just been something that stuck with me. Similar to the story, it feels like there are 3 well-defined sections that serve their own purpose. Lynn is basically just a tutorial. That was clearly the idea, and I think that it was executed perfectly. There was never really any time, other than me being stupid with Farina, when I felt that any of my units were in danger. It felt controlled and introduced the combat to me slowly, even though I really didn't need it. Then we jump into Eliwood's section, and the difficulty slowly ramps up. Once his father dies, it's full steam ahead. The final 5 or so chapters do have some legitimately challenging sections. I should note that I played this on Eliwood hard mode and Ironmanned it. Unless my lord just happened to die on a chapter with another unit, it was full steam ahead, no matter the cost. It's been a while since I've played another FE game. I decided to skip Engage, but I found the difficulty curve to be perfect for me, especially in the final few chapters. I found myself really enjoying all the little side quests and side objectives in each map. That's something that FE7 does really well. There's incredible variety in not only the map design, but also the different win conditions. Sometimes you have to kill the boss, or kill all the enemies, or seize the throne, or just survive. There are chests that you have to beat enemy thieves to just to make sure they don't loot it before you. Sometimes you have to make it to a village before another enemy destroys it. There are so many things to keep track of, and so many ways for you to accomplish both the main and side objectives, that it makes for a very unique experience for anyone who plays the game. Then you throw in that there are so many times when you can really run low on weapons, so you kind of have to ration out your options. Do you want to give your good units the bad weapons because they're already going to be able to hold their own in combat? Or do you give them the good ones and watch them become walking nukes on the battlefield? Unless it's Marcus. Yeah, just give him whatever, he'll solo basically the whole game. And of course you have the class systems and stat growths. Blazing Blade doesn't have branching class promotions like the later ones do, but I still found it fun to experiment around with different stat increasing items that I got. For example, I felt that my Oswin was already pretty strong, so I gave him the boots. Now he has way more movement and is able to quickly reposition into those choke points and wall out basically the entire enemy army. Or how about when I gave Lynn an HP increasing item that allowed her to actually participate in combat until she eventually became one of my best units after promotion. There's so much customization to this fun little GBA game, and it makes every playthrough feel different. You can play it pretty casually, like I did, or you can try to optimize every little thing about it. The choice is yours. The bosses are okay for the most part. I do wish they had a little more personality or really any plot relevance for the most part. They just kind of feel like a stats screen for most of the game. but that's more of a limitation of the genre. I wasn't the biggest fan of the final dragon fight. It was great narratively, but mechanically it just felt weird, I guess. I don't know if this was intentional, but I could only damage it with the legendary weapons. Lyn, Eliwood, and Hector all got one-rounded, so I just rescue drop cheesed it with Athos. Look, if they're gonna give me the OP old fart on the last map, I'm gonna get my money's worth. If there's only one issue that I have with the gameplay, it's the recruitment. Recruiting a character kind of falls into one of two categories. You either need to talk to them with one of your lords, or with another, usually completely random character. I'm fine with the lords doing the talking, but sometimes the hints for another character are really vague, and then you have to play the very lethal guessing game of trying to bait that enemy over to your army, but not letting them initiate combat because for some reason that doesn't work even if they attack the character they're supposed to talk to, all while you have to not get ganged up on by the other units, and often you can't let the recruitable unit attack you because they're usually able to dish out high damage, if not outright kill you. It's just, there's just so many little things to keep track of when you're trying to recruit units. And my god, trying to recruit Harkin in Chapter 25 was a nightmare with his Brave Sword. I get that he's a strong unit, so that risk-reward is going to be high, but with all the choke points in the map, and then the mounted units that he spawns in with, it was, well, the opposite of fun. I do love all of the optional maps you get throughout the game. These act as a sort of side quest, I guess. They tend to be more challenging than the required maps, and I enjoyed the different ideas that they throw at you. For example, you're tasked with navigating the disappearing bridges in 26X. They will go away with your units on them, so I ended up having a handful of units just get stranded towards the end. I could rescue them with a flyer, but you also have to keep in mind the units with bolting and the bishop in the middle with that berserk staff. Fortunately, you get a restore staff right before this map, so it does feel like you're always provided with an adequate amount of solutions to each of the game's chapters. That's honestly a good description for this game. All of the levels feel like a very open-ended puzzle. You're given a series of tools, and it's up to you to find a solution to each one. Not necessarily the solution, but a solution. And of course, your ability to effectively navigate the game's problems will snowball throughout the course of the game. If a unit dies, then you have to replace them with likely a worse one, and because your army is weaker, that puts other units at risk. It's scary in that way, but also really exciting. It's one of the reasons why I always Iron Man these games. If there's no threat of death, then there's no tension in the gameplay. And when there's no tension in the gameplay, there's no sense of triumph when you eventually win. I talked about this a lot in my Why You Should Iron Man Fire Emblem video, so if you want to know more and why I like these types of runs so much, go check it out. Another map that I really enjoyed was Chapter 28. You can only deploy 5 units, which threw me for a loop at first, but nearly all of the enemies are lower level unpromoted units, whereas yours should really be all high level promoted units. You have to split your small team up whilst dealing with damaging flame pillars and claustrophobic quarters, and oh yeah, moving boss with ranged attacks! Oh, it's a good thing this is a siege map because I don't know what I would have done with all of my units spread out. It's super fun mowing through these weak enemies, but seeing the boss move was a real oh shit moment for me. There were some times when I fell into the pitfall of expecting a unit to get better because of their class. Like, obviously paladins are always good in any FE game, but I promoted Sane into a paladin expecting him to be good, only to lose him on the very same map. I was expecting a diet Marcus, and instead I just got a slightly better Sane. It's the same thing with the 2 thieves that you get in Jafar. The promotion doesn't make them any good in combat, Jafar just has good stats. Overall, this is such a unique representation of asymmetric gameplay. Even though we have far more options and firepower than the enemies, we can't go in recklessly because our units are far more precious to us than any other units to the enemy. It's almost like a much more strategic and slower paced Dynasty Warriors game. It's also just representative of that old GBA era. It's a smaller game, and that's something that we just don't get very much of from the big studios. I'd also be remiss if I didn't at least mention the absolute beauty of the GBA attack animations and the pixel art that's here. I mean, there's a reason a video with all of the crit animations has over 650,000 views. It's something that I wish they'd bring forward in the series. I know that 3D models are rarely going to have the same character and style that 2D sprites would. 3D models do naturally feel more grounded, and 2D animators typically would overdo everything to convey a sense of power due to the limitations of the hardware. That's not true all the time, but it seems to be the case with most games. I always get excited when I see a unit do a little flourish right before attacking. It's a great dopamine hit when it plays in your favor, but gives you that sinking feeling of dread when you're on the receiving end of it. I enjoyed the bulk of my time playing through this 20-plus-year-old GBA game. It was nice to revisit a simpler time. Spent a lot of time in elementary school playing on my SP, and this reminded me of that time. And seeing Iwata's name in the credits also made me feel nostalgic. It's nice to see that even after he's been gone for, 10 years now, his work and legacy, they still live on. I don't know how much of a hand he had in actually developing this game, but the feeling is still there. Like I said earlier, the story isn't great. That's not really the point of playing the game. I didn't have the highest expectations for it going in, but I still found the narrative bland and really predictable. I was even more bummed that the support conversations were super difficult to unlock. To have all of that character development be basically non-existent because they weren't properly balanced seems like a massive issue that should have been addressed during development. Maybe I just wasn't aiming to unlock the conversations as much, but there shouldn't be any reason why I only unlocked 3 in an entire playthrough. The combat, however, is superb. It's so much fun to test your strategic knowledge, especially in the endgame. While I found Lynn's chapters to be fairly basic, I can understand that that was the point, as this was the introduction to the West. Each map offers a variety of primary and secondary objectives, and because of stat growths, each playthrough can be slightly different for every player. There's so many small things that just make the game fun in the moment-to-moment gameplay, while also maintaining that sense of lethality that was once the foundation of the series. I'd recommend giving this game a shot if you have NSO. It's not a super long game by RPG standards, it only took me about 20 hours to complete, and you'll be slowly eased into the gameplay loop. Fire Emblem is a fantastic game, if you're looking for a strategy game with no frills. It is pure, distilled tactics fun, even after more than 20 years. Thanks for watching.